All right, welcome everyone to the monthly Spark Talk. I'm Lisa Blue, and I'm a STEM H instructional specialist in the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning here at Eastern Kentucky University. Through the Spark Talks, I hope to demystify generative artificial intelligence technology while sparking conversations that will lead to innovative teaching and learning strategies across the higher education landscape. So I'm very glad you're all here today. Each month, our expert speakers provide insights and actionable strategies for the integration of Gen AI into the classroom, thereby enriching your teaching methods, empowering our students, and encouraging its ethical use while preparing our students for a very tech-forward job market. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker today, Dr. Dominic Ashby, a distinguished associate professor of English and the coordinator of first-year writing here at our institution. Dr. Ashby is a celebrated recipient of the 2023 EKU Libraries Faculty Award, a recognition awarded for his significant and meaningful collaboration with EKU libraries. He's an active member of the Provost Faculty Internship Program for the 2023-2024 cohort, demonstrating his commitment to fostering academic excellence and innovation. Currently, Dr. Ashby is also involved in an ambitious project, redesigning the Engage General Education course for English 102. This project aims to enhance students' information literacy, genre awareness, and workplace readiness skills, aligning closely with EKU's graduate profile key result areas. Dr. Ashby's work exemplifies dedication to educational advancement and student success, which leads us to our talk today. Welcome, Dr. Ashby. I'll turn it over to you.
Right. Thank you, Lisa. And good afternoon to everybody. And thank you for joining the February monthly Spark Talk on writing with AI. So as an instructor and writing program coordinator, I'm very interested in the ways that artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, such as ChatGPT and Bard, can fit into our teaching and learning. And I'm happy that so many of you are here today to share in a conversation about AI and college writing. To set expectations, let me say briefly first what this session isn't and what it will focus on instead. So first, the session is not about ways of outsmarting AI, detecting, eradicating it, or keeping it out of our classes. It's also not about presenting a one-size-fits-all approach to teaching with AI. Teaching and learning are contextual, so some things that may work for a particular subject or with a particular population of students may or may not work the same for other subjects or groups of students. So as you're listening, please consider how these ideas might look if applied to your institutions and in your classes. And I'd like to hopefully have some time to discuss those ideas that you're thinking about toward the end of our session. What I will focus on is how approaches informed by writing studies can be applicable in other courses, as well as writing studies courses that teach writing or that use writing as a tool for thinking and learning. My plan is to share some perspectives on the use of AI in the classroom, particularly for setting a tone that supports its ethical use, share some examples of approaches, and then invite those questions and discussion. Now, as writing coordinator, I do hear a lot of concerns about AI especially in first year writing, but beyond as well. And I definitely share these concerns, and I don't want to belittle or make light of these concerns in any way. I think that they are important to think about, to be aware of, but I don't want us to get too hung up on them, because then over concern can actually start to undermine some of the teaching goals that we have. So the instructor concerns about students using AI are very often rooted in this real concern in worrying about students shortcutting their learning process. When we assign writing, we often do it for one or a combination of these common reasons: to help students learn content, to give students space to think through ideas, for students to practice critical thinking, and to develop genre awareness, or that awareness of disciplinary conventions. That is, we want to use writing to help students learn the discourse norms and conventions, expectations of that discipline, field, or community, and to develop the audience awareness that they'll need to function as students within that discipline and later as professionals within the field. Now, what we worry about in regard to AI in this context is that when students offload all or too much of that work, of that heavy intellectual work and that sort of idea generation and genre development of genre awareness, audience awareness, when they offload all of that or too much of it onto generative AI, it circumvents those learning goals their instructors are trying to help them achieve. Now, generative AI isn't the only way students can and have circumvented these goals, unfortunately. So many of my suggestions here today are likewise, at their core, system agnostic, in that they are not only ways of teaching with writing in an age of AI. I'll give some specific suggestions for workable ways of applying these approaches that use AI as a tool, but the guiding principles run deeper, drawing from research and writing studies, pedagogy, and writing across the curriculum. Paramount to my approach is setting expectations, in particular, establishing a tone within a class or a program for conversations about and actual hands-on ethical use of artificial intelligence as a tool in our writing work. As is said time and again in discussions about pedagogy and AI, and it's said again and again with good cause, I think, AI writing tools are here to stay. And our students will encounter them in ever-increasing saturation and increasing sophistication in their academic, professional, and personal lives. AI-assisted writing tools, text generation, et cetera, are becoming baked into the very tools we use on a daily basis, such as Google Search, everything in the Microsoft Office suite, not to mention in creativity-focused tools like Canva, Adobe, and so on. It's incumbent upon educators to prepare students for a world where AI tools are present, even omnipresent. Even if we could excise these tools from our classroom, which I think is near impossible to do. If we want to hold on, especially we want to hold on to many of the digitally enhanced teaching tools that we've become so accustomed to and that our students benefit from so much. Even if we could, it would be irresponsible of us, I believe, to teach our students to operate within our disciplines as if those tools didn't exist, because they'll be right there in their workplace, on their smartphone, on their home computer, as soon as they leave our classrooms and graduate from our programs. So AI have become part of our cultural context, our rhetorical situation, and we need to prepare students to function effectively and ethically within this new situation. So that's kind of my soapbox, right? So let me start getting now to the things that I'm really wanting to be working toward. So these are some of the guiding principles that are shaping my perspective on AI. When ChatGPT was first announced a little over a year ago, I was pretty much immediately excited about the potentials for it for students. And the reason for that was because of my prior experience working with students in multimodal, multi-genre environments, and my prior experience of being not just impressed, but blown away by the work that my students did when they were working with some of these new media tools that we used in those environments. And so that taught me a lot about raising expectations for students, raising the bar, and also learning alongside of them and making that part of my pedagogy. So that's what I want to get into here a little bit in this section of the talk, when I'm talking about these guiding principles that I'm working from and from which I draw my attitudes toward artificial intelligence, generative AI, and how it can assist with our teaching and enhance our students' learning. I'll start with drawing some of a really basic principle, but an important one, drawing from ungrading, within which there's an imperative to trust students. Research about ungrading shows that this trust is built in large part through a creation of community, by building our classrooms into communities of practice. The class as a whole develops a sense of purpose and shared expectations, shifting the ethical imperative from a top-down coercive model, that is, use of AI is cheating, and if you cheat, I'll catch you and punish you. Moving from that to instead to an agreed upon sense of what is and is not acceptable use of AI is much more productive and respects our students. And I think that's important, right? That respect, that trust for them, fostering that then flows back, returns back toward us. Now, and I do want to say, right, I'm not advocating for naivete in our approach to AI, but I want teachers to be able to focus on what they do best, which is teaching, right? And I think trying to develop that trust is going a long way toward that. One of those ways of building that trust that I'm advocating is through transparency in the classroom, talking with our students. What are the goals of the course? Why are we doing this work? Not just the AI work, but any of the work in general. And then also, why are we working in AI into that? Why is it important? Why is it important to consider? Talking to students about what will students gain or learn by doing this work? How do AI tools fit in? It's also about transparency of grading. And I'll just bring this up briefly. I can talk about this more later if folks have questions, because I've been doing ungrading for 5-6 years now with a lot of success from courses from developmental co-requisite courses all the way through graduate courses. So I'm a big advocate of this. But I think transparency of grading is really important in terms of building trust. And when students, and part of that I believe is because when students resort to cheating, it is oftentimes because they're feeling overwhelmed in some way. And that may be a sense of being overwhelmed by how they think that the grades are being determined, which may or may not match up with how we actually do them, right? So being clear about that is so important in helping to make sure that students understand where that's coming from. Again, I won't go into, I'll just leave it at that, but if folks want to have a conversation on that, I'm glad to come circle back around later. Another principle, so trust being built through transparency, major foundation. Another idea that I want to develop here is this notion that on the slides, I'm putting down as educators as learners. And what I mean by that is that when we start using AI in the classroom, there's no need to be an expert before we start doing that. We don't need to be an expert in using AI to be able to use AI effectively in our teaching. Just as an example, so I've been incorporating digital pedagogy in my teaching for over 15 years now, but I didn't begin teaching that way. This was something I developed later in graduate school and then has really become integral to my approaches. One of the most important lessons I learned about digital pedagogy during my PhD work is that I, as a teacher, do not have to have mastered every digital tool that we as a classroom community will use in that class for that teaching to be effective. There's a lot of value in our students seeing us learn how to navigate new writing technologies alongside them. So the same applies for this new round of digital tools of generative AI and other AI-assisted tools. We individually don't have to have all the answers about AI or know all the ins and outs to be able to make effective use of it in our classes. And in fact, I find that oftentimes students respect us more if they see us working alongside it. What's more important than mastery of digital tools, including AI, is to link these tools to the academic and professional habits of mind we want our students to develop. In my case, as a rhetoric and writing teacher, that usually comes down to a focus on how AI tools can or cannot support our writing and thinking processes, how they can or cannot help us communicate with an academic audience or any audience, how they can or cannot help us achieve the purpose of the task that we're working on for a given assignment or project or what have you. In new media and rhetorical studies, scholars describe this approach as a focus on affordances, that is, identifying what a tool or approach enables and also what it may exclude or not be so effective at doing. Helping students to develop that awareness, having discussions about that, making that itself a part of the content of the course is really helpful. And that links then to this idea of the importance of enabling open conversations about AI use in our classrooms. Often, AI is new. Students get a lot of different messages about it. And so they may come to our classes being uncertain about whether a given instructor sees the use of AI, any use of AI, as legitimate or not. They may not know what sort of degree or level of use is appropriate for a class, and they may just be afraid to ask. They may be afraid to ask questions because they think, well, I might be labeled as a cheater or somehow penalized. Or, it may just be that, well, they like using it and they feel like, well, if I don't ask too many questions, then nobody's going to put pressure on it. And then, so there's this potential then of it being left unexamined. And then students may go too far with using it. So we need to open the conversations ourselves. We need to maintain them. Mentioning AI once during week 1 of the semester or addressing it in a syllabus statement by itself is not enough. We need that ongoing conversation, regularly returning to the topic, even if sometimes it's just briefly, right? Helps to establish AI usage as a legitimate topic for discussion, either within the class itself or during instructor conferences or office hours or what have you. Similar to how we want students to come to us with questions about evaluating research sources or about how to cite or otherwise give credit to others in work for our classes, we want them to feel comfortable coming to us and talking about what is and is not ethical or effective use of AI in our classes and within our disciplines. Another point that I would like to connect all of these two. So I've been kind of thinking about these underlying principles. Let's start thinking then about, okay, how do we put this into practice? And one big overarching thing here, I think, is to engage in and model hands-on practice with AI, right? And this may seem elementary, right? I don't know what our audience today, what your level of experience with using AI tools is. I anticipate it probably varies vastly amongst all of us. But if you have not yet, or if you've only done so in passing, make sure to try out some of these AI tools yourself. Familiarize yourself with what they can do. Importantly, how to access them, right? It's one thing to just say, oh, students sign on to AI. We need to be able to explain to them and help them. So try out the tool, know how to get logged into it so that you can help them too. Again, I know it's elementary, but I think it bears repeating. Also, for those of you who might be thinking about leading professional development for others in your groups, right? This is a new enough thing that I think addressing in PD some of these baseline access issues and how-tos is important. But again, try some tools out, try a few different ones, and I find myself guilty of this. I keep falling back on ChatGPT, but I need to expand out more, right? I mostly use ChatGPT and Bard. I keep hearing a lot about Claude. I need to get in there and do some more with that, right? So these are areas of growth for all of us. I feel like the variety of options available within AI tools, what they can do, and the barriers and entry points to access, these keep changing. They're very different now than they were a month ago, and definitely different than they were 6 months ago. Use them yourselves at least a little bit, and then model ethical use to your students. Think about AI as a tool. How can it fit within our own and our students' practices in ways that support the best practices we'd like them to leave our classes knowing? So for example, from a writing perspective, how can it help students with revision? How can it help them to share their ideas, right? There are great tools that are out there that can help students with the process of re-articulating ideas from, say, a research paper to something that might be more appropriate to different audiences. So there's a lot of different types of assistance that are available. Now it's up to each of us individually to think about, how does this fit into our classes, and do I want a particular kind of AI to be in the class, or do I want to be instead advocating that students use another one, right? If we are working it directly into our assignments, we get a little bit more control of it. If we're just leaving it more open, then it's a little bit Wild Westy, right? Students can be finding whatever they want. And sometimes we want them to do that. Sometimes we may want them to experiment. Other times we may want them to have a more regularized experience across everyone in the course. And then in that case, we want to be dictating, saying, okay, here is the AI tool that we're going to use for this particular assignment or in this activity. I think a goal here, we should aim to help our students develop literacy skills around AI, right? We talk about information literacy, we talk about digital literacy, we talk about lots of different types of literacy. Here's a new one, right? This is, yes, it's digital, yes, it's technological, but it has its own sort of varying rules and concerns that make it not intuitive, right? So thinking about the legitimate ways is something that we need to help students learn. So let's think about a couple of examples here. So I'm going to, and I may not have time to go into all of these. I want to be mindful here of time to make sure that we've got opportunities for asking questions. But here are 4 major areas that I'd like to show you some things that I've done with students or have worked on with assignments using AI. So all of these tie into different phases of writing assignments and different kinds of writing assignments. One is with research question generation. Another is looking at feedback and revision, how it might fit into that into that process. Some specific tools for thinking about revision, reverse outlining, and focusing on organization is something that I think is quite helpful and useful. Planning for remediation and genre transformations is another one. And these are by no means the end all and be all. These are just 4 things that I think can be effectively, fairly easily worked into approaches to writing assignments or writing projects, using AI with just sort of a base entry level, because all we're doing with here is entering text, right? There's no, we're not doing a lot of complex work on here. But so let's start here with thinking about the research question generation. And this is the one I'll probably spend the most time on because I think it's so helpful. And the context for the approach here is I pretty regularly teach English 102, which is our first year research and writing course at English or at EKU. I'm also in the midst right now of a redesign pilot that we're working on. We're piloting a shift over to an approach to multi-genre approaches, and along with that redesign, we've been really putting a lot of focus on the early stages of the research process, and spending a lot of time with thinking about generating good research questions to form that foundation then for the further work that students will do. And we've been partnering with our librarians, great friends in the library, who will incidentally, and I'm going to put in a little plug here, they are going to be giving a presentation next month about using AI tools specifically in the research process. So they're looking more at that area of finding sources. What I'm looking at here is more that stage before going into and starting to be searching for sources, which is asking those questions, finding out, getting a sense of, well, what do I need to even know So the approach that I advocate for is one that is blending together or is focusing a lot on interaction, on student interaction, and then we're folding in AI as an aid to that. So it's not a replacement for any of the in-person generative work that we'd be doing in our class. It's rather AI can be something that can bring in another perspective. I think a metaphor that I keep trying to come back to and remind my students of is I think it's really helpful to think of AI as an assistant, right? It's not a replacement for any of the work that I'm doing. Instead, it's something that makes certain parts of my job easier. And sometimes I need an assistant to just bounce ideas off of. And AI can actually be pretty good at that. So in this course, that the 102 redesign course that I'm teaching, I use a variation of the question formulation technique, or QFT, to help students develop questions for background research. And then we use it again a few weeks later for helping them to develop more in-depth questions. So after they've done some background research, then they return to the QFT. And so let me talk about that process a little bit. So in class, the students brainstorm ideas on their own. Then they share them within small groups to refine them and develop additional questions. And here, I think, is a great place to bring in AI to potentially help generate more questions or to help make their draft questions clearer and more in-depth. I think importantly here, students are not starting with AI. Instead, we bring AI in partway through the process. So students have meaningful input that they have already generated input that they can engage the algorithm with. Because I want my students to experience the difference between just giving a text generation tool like ChatGPT a general prompt, like what are some research questions about social inequality in the United States, the difference between that open question, and then when they put in some information, here is a list of questions about social inequality my class has generated. What are some other questions I should be asking? And then the students are putting in 10 questions they've already asked, and then ChatGPT is giving them more. So let me, I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment and then move over to a different document so I can show you some examples here of what I'm talking about. Okay, so here, these are, the first set of samples is from a course where I first tried this out with last fall. And then I have another set where I learned a little bit more about facilitating idea generation, question generation from this semester. But my first prompt here, this is that general prompt. I'm studying mental health in a first-year college research and writing course. Suggest 10 research questions that will help me acquire background information about mental health. I think it's helpful to put in some specific information into the prompt like this for tools like ChatGPT, so they know a little bit of, has some information about the context you'll be using it for. I think it's a good idea too to give specifics about about like number of output, amount of output that you're wanting. This can all help. So ChatGPT then gives me some responses. You may have noticed here, of course, I've highlighted several of these, and the reason for that is that these are responses that actually overlapped with some of the responses that my students had already made ahead of time. So on their own, in their small groups, students had come up with quite a list of questions. So actually down here, we can see some of those. And again, I've highlighted some of those points of overlap. So they've got lots and lots of questions that they put in. And again, these highlighted ones are ones that actually get sort of reinforced, because without having seen what the examples were, ChatGPT is already putting these out, and these overlap with what my students were coming up with. What I like about that sort of a lesson, if you will, for students is that the AI tool isn't like doing a better job than they are. There's already some overlap. It can validate some of the questions that they're putting in already. Say, look, you all working in groups of 5, and then bringing all your questions together as a class of 25 are able to come up with some really good questions. And you've got a lot in common with this background information that ChatGPT is like skimming the entire internet for and bringing in. So that's pretty good. Again, here are these questions that my students had written. I think it was also helpful here to talk with students about, well, what were the ones that didn't overlap with the immediate output from ChatGPT? Aren't these good questions too, right? So to have that kind of a conversation as well, like what is ChatGPT not thinking about? What is your local experience drawing in? EKU serves a lot of veterans. We have a lot of students in the National Guard. So that issues related to veterans came up quite a bit. We've got folks who are involved in teaching. So again, this is coming up. Lots of just a lot of really focused questions about mental health that were really good and important. And again, the ChatGPT itself didn't necessarily hit upon. So emphasizing those differences, what can and what can't it do? Here, and I'll just leave this up here for a moment, but we put in the questions that the students had and then say, okay, here are our questions. What are some others we should be asking? And the goal here was to identify, are there things we are missing with the questions that we've come up with? We found some places where we're on the same page as the AI tool. We found some others where we maybe have better questions than AI. But what else is here that maybe we should consider? So this can be another good sort of checking point for students. Interestingly, and I just bolded this because I thought it was funny, question 10 that ChatGPT put in was this sort of self-serving. How does technology such as artificial intelligence and virtual reality offer innovative solutions? Just a little bit of self-promotion that's in there. This semester, I used a slightly different approach. This time, my students they used the QFT, they generated questions, and then they narrowed it down to 5 priority questions, which they are currently using in my class this semester to be guiding their background research. So they chose this topic of social inequality. They've come up with these five questions and put that into ChatGPT, this time asking this question of, our course developed these questions on social inequality. Here are some research questions. Please suggest ways to further develop these questions. In this case, what the tool did for us was starting with the questions, turned the questions into a statement, and then added further sub-questions that are on here. So in this way, it can help to make sure that students are diving in a little bit deeper in these, showing some of the further complexity of the questions that they've already generated. So I think that's again, I think another really interesting approach. Sorry, and I am jumping back around here. I think it's important to discuss with students how the output generated from the AI when we're asking questions is based upon questions that other humans have raised, right? So because it's skimming the internet or its record of the internet from 2 years ago for what questions were being asked that are related to this topic. So it is in that way an effective way to compare their group's ideas to what are being asked from larger communities on the internet. I've also mentioned the approach of using reverse outlining and using this as a way to approach organization. I find that students oftentimes struggle with organization when they're working with their writing, especially when they're novice writers and they're just starting to get used to the expectations of college level writing, or when they're getting used to the expectations of their discipline. They can struggle with those different organizational patterns. And there are a lot of ways that we can that we can help them in the classes. But one thing that I think AI can be really helpful with is by doing reverse outlining and asking a student, say, to put in a draft of their essay, and then ChatGPT or whoever, please show me an outline of this essay draft. And then we can do things with that, like asking for, well, what might be some suggestions for revising that? What other suggestions do we have? And I'd like to show you an example here, but I have lost my screen share button. Let me see if I can find it again here. There it is. Sometimes you just have to move the window around a little bit. Okay. So, and this can be as simple as create an outline of my essay draft, right? So in this case, if the student has already dropped their essay into the draft into ChatGPT, then they can ask for a draft. So in the case of this example, this was a student research essay on inclusion. So I've put that in, and we dropped that into ChatGPT. This is not from one of my current students. This is from a previous student who I have permission for using their essay. So I'm able to use this then with showing this as an approach to my students, current students. But so we put that in. We've gotten a little bit of feedback, and then we ask, okay, ChatGPT, please outline my essay, and it breaks this down into a pretty good section by section outline. And this was a 10-page paper, and it breaks it down into multiple sections. Importantly, too, by the way, notice that it's not just breaking it down into some sort of a 5-paragraph approach, right? So it's really identifying the complexity that the student had put in to their initial organization. But this can be helpful for helping a student with then evaluating, is this layout the most effective one that I have, et cetera. We can also have AI give a little bit of feedback on that. So another thing that we did with this example was suggest an alternative outline for ordering the ideas. What are the advantages of the suggested outline? And then again, it's providing an outline, some parts of the outline similar to the original one, and then others are different. And then what I think is really interesting is this very brief explanation, right? Okay, we're changing this for logical progression, and then this idea of a case study focus, right? The student had never really thought of what they were doing as a case study. It's just they had put in some personal anecdotes and some examples from their school. And with this outline, it's suggesting, well, call attention to the fact that you're doing that, make it a more critical, important part of the essay by giving it its own dedicated section. And from my perspective, that was pretty good advice, right? What I like about what's happening here from this prompt that's been given to the AI is that this is a way by asking students to ask for an outline, is that this is giving them something where they're still maintaining agency. I found that if we instead are asking for ChatGPT to suggest a reorganized version of this essay or suggest ways to reorganize, it has a tendency to go in and be a little bit heavy-handed and start rewriting things for the student. And I think that that can have the effect of the student thinking, oh, what I did, my draft is not very good. I should be going along with what the AI is saying. Or it's just so completely taken it over that the student is just like, oh, well, this would have been so much work. I should just go with this. If instead we're asking for work with outlines, I think this is giving students, more, again, more of a sort of a schematic overview. They can make more strategic decisions about which parts do they want to change and not. Or they might, again, come back to the idea that, you know, actually, I liked my old organization. I'm going to stick with that. The feedback and revision, I'll be brief on this. I think that this was really interesting in that, so my first example, this was just asking for general feedback. I was using the same essay as above. And then I just asked, how can I improve this essay? And it gives me this kind of generic, your essay describes a crucial topic and provide invaluable insights. Here are some suggestions. And then it starts going in this pretty basic, start with a hook. Incidentally, I did this multiple times with different essays. Every time the feedback it gave for the introduction was start with a compelling hook. So it seems like it just says that regardless of what's actually in the essay or what the genre is. Add a definition. Every single essay I put in, it was saying either define, add a definition, or make a clearer definition. Every single essay I put in, it says something about the thesis statement. So it becomes this very formulaic sort of feedback that it's giving, including some things that, depending on the genre and the situation, may not be that great. So, for example, this is an English course. A lot of times in English writing, we're actually asking students not to restate their thesis because people can just go back to page 1 and read their thesis, right? Because it's an essay, it's not a speech. People don't need to hear word for word the thesis again. Yet right here is this advice, oh, put exactly your thesis in there. So some of the advice is actually suspect for the discipline that the student is working in. So I'm not very happy about that as a way of giving feedback. But what I found that works much better is if instead we're focusing more in terms of asking about effectiveness and naming the specific genre that the student is writing about. So using something like evaluate the effectiveness of this argument solution essay, or evaluate the effectiveness of this business letter. Or I did this for some of my own work the other day, evaluate the effectiveness of this letter of recommendation. When doing that, it's a lot more focused. It's a lot more on point. And importantly, especially for courses or assignments where we may be introducing students to new genres, this is giving really specific, actionable suggestions and feedback that students can be using. It can be a much better guide in terms of them evaluating how well is their work fitting into this new and unfamiliar genre that they may be working in. So I find that very helpful. And again, thinking about the course that I'm teaching now this semester, or the approach that I'm using this semester, which is using a multi-genre approach, I think that something that helps with building genre awareness is really critical. Now I'm running low on time, so I do want to very briefly summarize a couple of other things here in terms of being able to make these kinds of approaches effective that I've just showcased or given examples of. I think key at the top is this idea of the thoughtful integration, right? This needs to be more than just add AI and stir. We need to have a rationale for why we're doing it. We need to be able to articulate that to ourselves. We need to be able to articulate it to our students and have conversations about it. We can be working it directly into the assignments. We can be working it into our in-class activities, but give students a framework for why we're doing it. Give them the learning objectives. Why am I having you do this? What's the learning outcomes? How is this going to help you? Balance AI with other methods, right? So these use of AI should not be a replacement for anything else that we're doing in our teaching. This is not a replacement for instructor feedback. This is not a replacement for peer review. This is not a replacement for writing centers. Instead, what I like to do is add it into the mix so that students can see how it compares to the other things and ideally adds the value of those other things, right? If they see, oh, well, AI can help me with this, but it's not so good at these things, whereas the writing center, wow, they can really help me on this. It can give them more reason for, and a more conscientious reason for when they would reach out, say, to an instructor, or when they reach out to the writing center. They can have done some of those other things on their own where AI could help, have done that already, and then go to the writing center and get that more focused, more effective help. It's really, really, really important that we include reflection in our teaching when we're using AI. I think that reflection, so research on transfer in general has really pointed out that reflection is necessary if we want students to be able to abstract and move ideas out of our classes into other contexts, whether that be other classes or into their careers or what have you. So we know this already from other forms of teaching. I think that in terms of reflection about AI, it's twofold. One is reflecting on AI is a way of students taking, say, this ethical approach that we're wanting them to develop in our class and applying it to other situations, right? So that itself is very important. But it's also, this becomes an accountability measure as well. So if we're asking for, when students turn in an assignment, to reflect on and talk about how they've used AI in that, they're documenting for us a part of their process. So this can help in those areas where somebody might have an academic integrity concern, right? To be able to look at this, if everybody is expected to be able to very clearly explain and articulate how they were using AI and where, and if that is across the board for the assignments where AI is being used, then if somebody doesn't do that, right, this is, we have some grounds then in terms of academic integrity. So I know, I'm saying a lot. I was saying earlier, talking about trusting students, and yes, absolutely, but also that part about not being naive. Right. So, giving them, this reflection is also a way of self-accountability, and building, again, this idea of building a community of practice and building community standards within the course. If everybody is expected to be able to articulate and explain those uses, people have less excuse not to. Finally, also tied to that and also related to, in particular to accountability, be sure to develop documentation expectations. Set clear guidelines for acknowledging AI use. I've found that some of our professional organizations are getting to the point now where they're laying that out in writing. MLA has a style guide now for how to give credit to content created by AI, but it's not sufficient yet, right? What's missing there are those discussions about process. So MLA gives us a way to cite things like an image that's been generated through DALL-E. It gives us a way of citing to or documenting either a direct quote or a paraphrase of an idea that was generated by ChatGPT. So that's all well and good, but going back to that point about reflection, what I'm interested in as well is how are students using AI? And our professional organizations don't necessarily have a protocol for that. So often we need to develop that and make that clear within our classes. And that can be something we can co-develop with our students, or we, at the very least, we need to be making sure that we are explaining it to them well and encouraging them to ask us questions about that. So quick recap here of some of my main points. I think this idea of ethical integration is really, really important. Focus on incorporating the AI tools in an ethical and effective way. We can support this through building trust, trusting our students, establish transparent expectations. We should recognize AI is a permanent tool and we need to be teaching for it. And we should embrace continuous learning, right? We as teachers don't have to be masters of this yet. We can be learning alongside of our students, and we should be open with them about that. I think it adds to our credibility. And I think these are great ways of helping us to empower students. And I do want to give people time for questions and discussion. I know we've just got 9 minutes left, so let me go ahead and pause and see what folks would like to talk about.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Ashby. I know English was on the front lines because when this technology first rolled out, the first thing my student partners tried to do was write my essay for me. No, don't outsource your thinking. So yes, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll address as many as we can in the 8 minutes we have remaining. Yes, Irina.
Hi, thank you so much for this. So I teach at Brandeis University. I'm a faculty member here. I'm also faculty director of our Center for Teaching and Learning. And I'm actually leading, we call them AI sandboxes this semester for small groups of faculty. And so I was taking down some of these great ideas to share with my faculty. Here's one question that I hear from, so I have a small group of faculty who are already aware, like they would find this webinar to be extremely useful. And then there is one faculty member who says, why should we be doing this? What adds, like, I understand all of this, but why should I be asking students to go to ChatGPT and ask it to improve my questions? Why can't I just continue doing it with students? I don't see the value in that. And we're opening Pandora's box. Or another comment, why should I be teaching them effective prompting? Because I'm teaching them how to use it instead of just doing this themselves. And so I feel that I have something to say in response, but it's not necessarily me. So I would love to hear what you think. What would you be saying to this faculty?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Irina. No, these are great questions, right? I would say, first, I think Pandora's box has already been opened, right? So in some ways, this is us having to be a little bit reactive, but maybe doing it in a way that gives us a little more control again. And so my advice to those faculty would be, well, let's try out both. I think that if we ignore it, I think that students are just going to try to figure it out on their own and do it themselves behind our backs, right? And trying to pass it off. I think that if we are instead acknowledging, okay, this exists, but let's do both and compare the results. I think that there are lots of cases where what our students do in our classes, especially when they're doing group work and you're getting that great, sort of that knowledge of the crowd that's coming through, and the enrichment that happens from working together. I think that oftentimes their students generate better content, right? And and I think that if they can see that what they're doing is on par and often better than what AI is, I think that's a great learning outcome. I think also seeing those points where, yeah, okay, here are some places where AI can maybe save me a little bit of time in a way that's not undercutting my learning. Again, I think that can be helpful.
Irina, can you drop the name of that book into our chat? We had someone ask for that name, please. All right, we've got another question from Lisa. She wants to know, do you pair this with other tools such as in Blackboard, where it matches with the percentage of overlap with other papers?
Yeah, so personally, I've actually moved away in most cases from using AI, the plagiarism checks. And I know this varies. This has to vary depending on the course and on the assignment, and I recognize that. But I'm generally not using it. I'm really leery of a lot of the supposed AI detection tools. So, and I make a distinction between a plagiarism tool that is looking at, oh, well, this is exactly like this, here's matching up with what we're seeing on Wikipedia, here's matching what's something that's on EBSCOhost, et cetera, right? But these AI matching or these AI identification tools, they really vary a lot in terms of accuracy. Their accuracy is questionable, and it can misdiagnose certain things. So I know that there was a finding that certain of the things that get flagged by AI detection tools actually match up with certain ways that some non-native speakers are using when they're first acquiring certain of the discourse norms that we're using, especially in academic writing. So it can actually lead to, I think, some really damaging misidentification. So I am leery of using them. Yeah.
All right, we have another question from Lee. Do you have tips as far as equitable access? The ChatGPT 4.0 model is much better than the free GPT 3.5, as we've all seen. My university really tries not to have us add additional cost to students, i.e. the $20 per month. Any ideas on how to approach this and still embrace AI implementation in the classroom?
Yeah, this is a concern of mine as well, and and we can add into it also concerns about like privacy concerns. I know for when I signed up for my ChatGPT account, I had to give it identifying information, including my phone number. Not everyone is comfortable with doing that. I do also use Bard some, so I'm on the free. I'd signed up for the beta of that through the Google Labs and got into that pretty quickly. That one may be a little more accessible for folks. But yeah, that access to like ChatGPT 4.0. Honestly, in my classes, I've just been using 3.5. I did last year had for a few months had paid for myself for the upgraded version, and then when I'm doing sessions with the full class, right, then sometimes I can be the one who's piloting that and running that. So that way, it's just me paying for that and not my other students. So I think that is a I think that's a possibility.
Another
it's not
option
perfect.
too,
Yeah.
Another option is to go through Microsoft Bing, which has been renamed Copilot. As long as you go for creative or precise, those are running off GPT-4. You do lose some capabilities with the paid version, but you do get that large language model power between 4.0. If you go for more balance, that does default to ChatGPT 3.5. So that's another workaround. All right, we are out of time today, but I do want to just thank everyone again for joining us. A link to the recording and a short survey will be sent out by the end of this week. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me directly. So this is Lisa Blue. I want to thank you again for joining our monthly Spark Talk, and thank you, Dr. Ashby, for presenting such a wonderful topic for us.
Thank you. And again, thanks everybody for coming in. And if you do have questions for me too, also feel free to reach out to me. You can find my contact information on EKU's website. I'm in the Department of English, so you can find my email address there. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.